Everyone's clamoring for changes at the border. Stay tuned to hear what the Ivory Tower thinks of President Biden's latest plan.
This program is brought to you by the members of WCNY. Thank you.
Geddes Federal Savings and Loan offers home loans, IRAs, money market, checking, and savings accounts.
Geddes Federal, how can I help you this morning?
Personal service. Get it at Geddes. Offices in Westvale Plaza and in Manlius.
Bond, serving public and private companies, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs, providing a crucial link with guidance on business matters, regulatory compliance, intellectual property, and employment law. Bond, essential to your business.
Ivory Tower is sponsored by James Jordan Associates Architects, providing professional architectural services to educational, commercial, and institutional clients throughout New York State. James Jordan Associates Architects, with offices in Richfield Springs, New York.
Welcome to Ivory Tower. I'm Barbara Fote from Syracuse University. Joining me on the panel this week are Sarah Pralle from Syracuse University, Seidule from Hamilton College, Rick Fenner from Utica University, and Luke Perry from Utica University. Panel, President Biden this week set out a proclamation limiting immigration at the southern border. The new threshold has already been met, consecutive days of 2,500 persons coming in. So this stops all illegal entry along the border. Asylum seekers can still use an app to make an appointment and enter legally at ports of entry. But with 1,400 appointments per day, they may have to wait a good while. So Rick, I thought federal courts struck down something like this under President Trump.
They have, and in my view, I'm not sure that President Biden would be all that unhappy to have the courts, strike down this as well. Immigration has been high on the list of things that voters have said they're worried about, and they see Trump as being much more able to deal with the situation. So putting this forward allows Biden to say he's tried something. If the court strikes it down, then he can throw it back to Congress and remind people that it's been Republicans lately that have been dragging their feet. He had put forth a proposal that would have included even more money to deal with this problem, as well as the restrictions, and the Republicans have refused to put it forward. So I think he gets some political mileage out of that.
Political mileage, Ty?
Well, I think that I think we could look at this not just here in the U.S., but across the world. And populism, the fire of populism receives its oxygen from anti-immigrant fervor. And that we're seeing that right now. And until that fervor dies down, this is going to continue to be an issue. And I don't think it will die down because the global south is going to continue to move north because of climate change. Additionally, we're now at about 14% foreign born. And that is about the most we've ever had. 15% was what it was in the 1920s. And when that happened, that's when the racist immigration laws passed and really limited immigration down to about 5% by 1965 when the new laws came into play. And when that new law came into play, it allowed people from all over the world. And I think that's what has fueled this populism is partly racism and partly the number of foreign born. So Biden is trying to react to that populism, and it's not just happening here, it's all over the world.
I think there's please, after you.
Oh, I think, what's disheartening about that is that there's not a lot of counter narrative to counter that right-wing populism discourse around immigration and immigrants. And it's not something you can just do in an election year. You have to build that kind of counter narrative to really make the case that immigrants are not the enemies, they're not criminals, they actually can add and are a positive influence on our country. But the Democrats just have basically tried to sort of ignore the issue, I think, and hope that it sort of goes away or that other issues crowd it out, like abortion rights. And I find it very difficult to see Biden embracing this kind of enforcement-only policy because these policies send messages, right? So maybe politically he doesn't want it to actually go into effect, but it's sending messages and it's framing immigrants in a certain way that in the long term is really harmful, I think.
I think the perception is important, as you all talked about, but the public administration reality is really important as well. I mean, we have 2 million applications that need to be processed right now for asylum, and we have 1,500 government employees who do that. Mm-hmm. It'll cost $2 billion per the government's estimate to close that gap over 5 years. And I don't think there's the will or the capacity to do that, not only from Congress, but from the federal government as well. And so the other issue is that you also have 1.3 million people who have applied for asylum in the U.S. who have been denied, and they have 90 days to leave, and they haven't left. So I think Biden needs to take action as the president. He's running the ship. Even as Rick said, if Congress is doing nothing, they look to him to do something. And I could see how you do this as a first step, and then hopefully if you're reelected, then you try to raise funds to start closing that gap and get people here properly.
Because if there's no money attached with this, so there's not much that can be done, right, now?
Right. I think one way from a public administration perspective is to try to stop the people from coming in to help get a handle on the problem and then try to close the gap. So it's kind of like step one, and then money and follow through is step two.
But step one, I think, is going to get struck down by the courts. So we're back to the starting point again.
Well, it depends how they interpret detrimental national impact. That's the letter of the law that needs to be followed here. Obviously, Trump's policies were perceived as somewhat racist or bigoted, and so I don't think there's that element here. So I don't think it's certain that will be struck down.
Sarah, I'm wondering how you think this will affect the local congressional races. Elise Stefanik, Brandon Williams, Claudia Tenney. How do they look at immigration and what Biden's doing?
Well, I think they're in line with the right-wing Republicans on immigration, the party line on immigration, and so they are going to use it to run on for sure. And so the question, and I think I agree with Rick in the sense that I'm not sure politically this is actually going to help Biden, because honestly, people see Trump as the one who's quote best on immigration, and Biden might help neutralize the issue a little bit with maybe some independent voters, but that's not going to stop these local Republicans from running on this issue and running hard on it.
But they are going to have to address the issue of why Republicans haven't acted before on his more substantive proposals. And so I think his hope is to deflect and put the pressure on them to not just say too little, too late, but then, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it does go back. This asylum law is an old law. It comes after World War II, when we were having when we kept Jewish people from Europe from coming in, and so international law changed to allow this asylum seekers in. But now this asylum has been changed, and with social media, everybody can put it on their app, or they can have asylum seeking much easier. And when they do that, the numbers are just overwhelming us. So I do think that the law is going to have to change. But right now, that's not going to happen as long as the Republicans see a winning political strategy, and they have it.
And the Democrats, progressives just going to keep quiet, Sarah, and go along with Biden on this, even if they don't really like it?
Well, some are speaking out against it. So this is, this politically, it's not a good strategy to choose policies to divide your own coalition. You should be picking issues that divide your opposition. So in that sense, there have been people speaking out. Representative Jayapal, for example, I actually agree with her, a lot of her criticism, right? And so I think they're going to face some pressure to dial that criticism down. We're still many months away from the election. But they make some really useful points about this rhetoric and how harmful it is and how it's not really solving the problem. And the reason why people are claiming asylum, so many, is because in part we don't have legal ways for them to get into the country.
But this is part of a strategy that we're going to see both Biden and Trump follow, and that is moving toward the center. There's the median voter hypothesis that says, in order to be elected, you have to have views that are more in line with mainstream, and this is one in immigration, and Trump has tried to do it with abortion. So I think we're going to see more of this.
Our next topic relates to diversity in the workplace. Research shows that women of color who start businesses get less than 1% of all the venture capital given out. So one such fund, the Fearless Fund, has offered $20,000 grants to black women entrepreneurs. A conservative group has sued, saying such grants violate the Civil Rights Act because they discriminate against women of other races. And this week, a federal appeals court in the Southeast stopped those grants while the legal case proceeds. Luke, what's your take on this?
I think this is certainly a worthwhile cause that this nonprofit is working towards. Unfortunately, I think they've been tripped up by the letter of the law with the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which you mentioned, which bans racial discrimination when it comes to contracts. This was originally intended to help protect former slaves from being discriminated against. Here we are in a different time, and now we have a different legal interpretation of how that applies. I think moving forward, what they have argued is that they're not actually issuing contracts, they're providing donations. At the same time, on their website, it explicitly says that they're giving contracts. So I think they're going to probably need to shift in how they approach what they're doing, pursue the same goals, but move away from that language, perhaps move towards a focus on lived experience where applicants can talk about their background and use that as a way to still help the people they want to help and comply with the law.
I just think it's awful and ironic that a law that was created to help the formerly enslaved is being used as a cudgel against their descendants. Mm-hmm. And it is saying that colorblindness is going to cancel 400 years of history. Mm-hmm. And I just, it just is it's cruel to be doing that. And if black families have 1/10 the wealth of white families. And if you've ever been to the Black Belt in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, you see the incredible poverty there. And that's done by policies created in the 20th century, whether it's the color redlining or segregation. And so the idea that we're going to use laws that meant to help the formerly enslaved to hurt their descendants just seems cruel.
It's, I think it's a valid program to try to remedy the racial imbalances that took place before, and they're still here. We don't have a level playing field. It may be more level, and I think it's somewhat disingenuous that groups like the Alliance for Equal Rights, what a great name, had been silent when the advantages were to whites. And now that, again, we're trying to remedy some of these past imbalances, now they're coming up playing the victim here.
And I would just add that like these right-wing legal organizations have a number of these lawsuits, not all of which have been successful. They've sued Amazon, Pfizer, some other companies for some of their programs, the DEI type programs. And they don't always win, but the point is it can have a chilling effect, right? Companies are risk averse. They don't want huge lawsuits that they have to defend. They don't want the publicity that this brings. And so a lot of them are quietly changing their DEI programs so that they are not sort of helping out minority groups and making it available to all. And so this is really important, right, that this kind of has this larger chilling effect, because when you look at this particular case, the stakes seem kind of low. I mean, this company only gives out 4 of these. They're $20,000 each, so that's $80,000 in grants to black women. It's pretty small potatoes, so you kind of wonder, like, why are they doing this? And it's really because they're in a much larger fight to claim that whites are the victims and to try to get rid of any kind of race-conscious policies.
And I think they've been fairly successful legally. I mean, this group has been involved in 24 or so lawsuits, and 1/3 of those have got to the Supreme Court. They struck down part of the Voting Rights Act. They struck down affirmative action policies in colleges, as we talked about on the show, and now this. So if you look at a group and their impact over the last 30 years, it's been pretty significant, in addition to what you said, the reverberations of that as well.
And we also know that the courts for the most of American history have been very conservative. There's that short period of the Warren Court where it was more liberal and more race conscious. But other than that, throughout American history, they've used the courts to limit the freedom and to limit equal rights rather than to increase them.
Rick, I'm wondering if this, Sarah talks kind of about this trend, I'm wondering if this would have an impact on university students who might be applying for some kind of diversity fellowships, or Sarah's mentioned DEI, diversity, equity,
I
inclusion.
think there certainly can be. As Luke said, they've won a number of cases. As Sarah said, even in the cases that they lost, the companies have changed their policies. There really has been a chilling effect of this, and I think it's going to continue forward.
So Luke, if this gets to the Supreme Court, they've had some different decisions related to race. Do you have a sense of what the court might decide on this issue? Well,
given the nature of the court, I mean, this is the most conservative court we've had in recent memory. So again, I'm not a Supreme Court expert, but based on that precedent, I would suspect that it would look open-minded, if not favorably, towards the argument here.
Ty, do you see other ways that companies could be helping support women entrepreneurs of color?
Well, I do think it's interesting of where the courts have allowed race-based, allowed us to look at that. And the one has been the military academies. So they have a carve-out for affirmative action for the military because they say, listen, we need to ensure that our officer corps looks like the enlisted corps, and we can't just have an officer corps that's 1 or 2% African American. So we say it's important for our military, and it is, but then that same argument could be used in other areas as well, and they say no, it can't. So it's just an interesting how the court is parsing this, and there are cases for that right now. So I don't know how companies are going to do this. They're so risk averse, as you said, how they're going to do that. I know we're certainly in higher ed trying to figure out how that's going to work.
And lots of people are going to be trying to figure out how it works. Well, it felt like summer this week, and so I've asked the panel to look at their bookshelves and find a book to recommend to you for your summer reading. It might be one they've read or one they're ready to read this summer. Sarah, start us off. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I'm recommending The Overstory by Richard Powers, which I read last year. And it's a real sweeping novel that centers trees as kind of the main characters. That might seem odd, given that trees don't seem to do that much. But that's actually what the author is trying to challenge us to think of trees in more human-like ways, that they're parts of communities, they help each other out, they learn from one another and communicate with another. And it also has human characters, so it has lots of really interesting stories. The stories start intersecting when these various characters go out west and become radical environmental activists in support of saving old-growth forests.
Okay, Ty, what's yours?
I have the Liberation Trilogy by Rick Atkinson, and yesterday was the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and if you want to understand D-Day and the best writing I've seen about it, Rick Atkinson's final book on this trilogy is Guns at Last Light. He researches like the devil, writes like an angel, and it is a showing of one of America's finest hours, which is triumphing over the evil of fascism, liberating the death camps, and freeing millions of humans from Nazi terror. So it's a great read. I recommend it.
3 for 1 there. Rick, what have you got?
The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society by Joseph Stiglitz. Stiglitz, who's won the Nobel Prize in Economics. In this book, he argues that the political right has a simplistic and flawed vision of freedom, and this causes them to equate unregulated markets with freedom and government and regulation of markets with a loss of freedom. And he goes through and does a very good job of showing how one person's freedom can easily cause another's loss of freedom, and that we need to come up with a new system, both political and economic, that ensures that freedom of all can be brought forward. And he says that sometimes collective action can lead to more freedom than simply letting individuals do whatever they want.
So it sounds a little heavy.
Yes, but for anyone who'd like to know, he's done a very good job of dealing with issues from wealth distribution to globalization, and he's an excellent writer. This is general nonfiction, and this is not just for economic nerds.
Okay,
like
so
me.
it's easy to read. I could
Yes.
understand some of it. Okay, Luke, what have you got for us?
When I think summer, I think baseball, and I'm currently reading the book called The Arm by Jeff Passan, who's a journalist. Love the subtitle here, Inside the $1 Billion Mystery of the Most Valuable Commodity in Sports. Youth coaching is another major service endeavor for me, and I coach Little League and help run our town's Little League. And one thing I need to do is coach young pitchers. And if you followed baseball at all, particularly pitching, you know that this century we've had an epidemic in terms of pitchers blowing out their arms, specifically tearing the ligament that helps hold their elbow together. And this book chronicles how we got here and tries to provide some insights as to how we can maybe remedy this very challenging situation.
Is there a key something that we've done wrong to have all these arms blow out, as you say?
Well, one critique in the book is the rise of year-round specialization in sports, which would be travel leagues. And if you're a pitcher and you play baseball and you pitch year-round and you're 8, 9, 10 years old, particularly when you can throw 70, 80 miles per hour, that's probably not going to be good for your ligaments in your elbow. So pitch limits and not specializing in playing year-round seems to be one potential remedy, though there's no clear consensus on that.
And that's occurred in so many other sports, not just baseball.
Yeah, and it's a moneymaker. That's one of the reasons, too, that people do that.
Dave Chinetri on email told me that he and his roommate exchanged books. And so his roommate gave him a book called Robert E. Lee and Me by a guy named Ty Seidule. Ty?
I recommend it.
Yeah.
Well, one book that I would like to recommend is called White Too Long by Robert Jones. It is, the title of it comes from a James Baldwin quote, which is, white people have been white so long that they are beyond any conceivable hope of moral rehabilitation. It's really about white supremacy in American Christianity. And the author is head of a public research group, and they did an academic study showing that on the racism scale, white Christians are much higher than the general public, than all whites, and even than all whites who are not religious at all. It's a hard read, I will confess that, because it really got to my heart in our church book group that read it. But it's really important for us to know history, because I'm sure, as Ty would say, and we don't know it, we can't change it. I want to also, since I have a minute, tuck in another book, which is actually a recommendation from two of our Ivory Tower viewers. And that is American Ramble. Ann and Dan Gully gave me this book when we were on the road at Utica University. It's written by a Wall Street Journal reporter who walked from Washington, D.C. on back roads and country lanes all the way to New York City. And it's about the people he met. It's part memoir, it's part spiritual journey, and it's infused with a lot of history of Harper's Ferry and those little towns that he met. He is a very gifted writer, and so I would encourage you to take a look at American Ramble. And now let's go from the bookshelf to the grade book. And Sarah, who gets your F?
So my F goes to Governor Hochul, who has indefinitely paused New York City's congestion pricing program. It would have been the first in the country. These policies have been successfully implemented elsewhere. They help reduce traffic and local air pollution. And in addition, the New York City plan would have raised $1 billion a year to improve New York City's subway and bus system, which is in dire need and long overdue. So it's really disappointing to see a good policy that was decades in the making scuttled at the last minute.
Ty, how about your F?
My F goes to Steve Bannon. After the Trump conviction, he is openly calling for Republican prosecutors around the country to charge Democrats with crimes, even if no crime has been committed. However, I do have a little schadenfreude in that he is going to jail starting on 1 July for contempt of Congress. So maybe he's getting some just desserts.
Rick?
My F goes to Russia for running a secret disinformation campaign aimed at creating the impression that the upcoming Paris Olympics have significant security shortcomings, trying to scare people away.
So are they doing this on social media?
There were a number of ways that they were trying to get at and spread this information, including social media, yes.
That's what I love about the A's and F's. You teach me things I don't know about. Luke, how about your F?
Similar theme, different situation. My F goes to the Israeli government for using fake social media accounts to lobby members of Congress for increased military aid. I expect this from our adversaries, like Russia, but not our allies.
How about somebody that's getting an A? Sarah, who have you got?
My A goes to the state of Colorado for enacting a law that'll make it easier for residents of detention centers and jails to vote in statewide elections. Not all inmates are eligible, but for those who are, it can be very difficult to vote. So it's reassuring to see a state making it easier to vote rather than more difficult, which is the unfortunate direction that many other states are taking.
Ty.
My A goes to the U.S. Army's 7th Transportation Brigade and 3rd Army. They are creating a pier to deliver life-saving aid to Gaza. A storm destroyed their first effort, much like the man-made pier that was destroyed 80 years ago on D-Day. But they'll fix it, and it's a reminder that the U.S. military reflects America when it's at its best, saving lives around the world.
We don't always think about that when we think
don't.
about the military.
Right, but we save a lot of lives through the U.S. Navy, Air Force, Army. Again, we reflect the nation when it's at its best and occasionally when it's at its worst.
A good reminder. Rick, how about your A?
Well, like Luke, come the summer, I think of baseball. My A goes to New York Yankees, who won their 8th straight game last night. They have baseball's best record, and they've accomplished this without Garrett Cole, last year's Cy Young winner, winning are throwing even a single pitch for them this year, it is a great time to be a Yankees fan.
Oh my goodness, all those Yankee fans out there are glad for that. How about you, Luke? Who's got your A?
My A goes to thousands of volunteer school board members across the country who will complete their annual term this month. They play a vital role in developing district goals, budgeting, and implementing state education policy. It's often a thankless and tireless job, but an important one that helps kids.
And you have some experience.
I do, well, yes. I don't miss it. It was a lot of work, but I'm glad that I did it for the time I did.
Good, very good. Well, thank you. Just one little history note. 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act, which declared that all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits are citizens of the United States. 1924, long overdue, but that is a 100th anniversary. And as we close, I encourage you to write us your opinions on these topics. The addresses are on the screen. We're now on YouTube, so each show segment is there. Look for the playlist on WCNY's YouTube page. The show airs on TV, of course, on Fridays at 8, Saturday afternoons at 5:30, and you can find us streaming online anytime at WCNY.org. Be well and good night.
This program is brought to you by the members of WCNY. Thank you.
Geddes Federal Savings and Loan offers home loans, IRAs, money market, checking, and savings accounts.
Geddes Federal, how can I help you this morning?
Personal service. Get it at Geddes. Offices in Westvale Plaza and in Manlius.
Bond, serving public and private companies, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs. Providing a crucial link with guidance on business matters, regulatory compliance, intellectual property, and employment law. Bond, essential to your business.
Ivory Tower is sponsored by James Jordan Associates Architects, providing professional architectural services to educational, commercial, and institutional clients throughout New York State. James Jordan Associates Architects, with offices in Richfield Springs, New York.